Okay, today I'm at Brighton Racecourse with Chris Fawcett. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us today, Chris. So, how would you describe what you do for a living currently?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me, Simon. Yeah, what I do currently, I'm I run a company on working in AI programming, and also got a couple of websites on the go. Previously, I've been a professional gambler.
Now, obviously, you've told me a fair bit about yourself prior to this. The AI thing, it looks like you were quite a pioneer of all that, getting into that for the gambling. So, from what you told me, you went from having your first bet won at school in 1991 to betting for a living in 1998. So, how soon after your first bet did betting for a living become a goal?
I think pretty much the first ever bet. First bet I ever had was actually on. I was in London with friends, and I think I'd have been about 15 one summer, and we'd bought this computer program, and we kind of entered in all the little form, like won last time, all this sort of thing, and it spat out this horse, and we just said, right, okay, we'll club together. We put 20 quid on it, and I think it was 9-2, and it came in. After that, I just thought, this is easy money. I really want to sort of learn more about this, and that's kind of what set me off.
So what was the computer program? I remember seeing a few advertised back in the day. Brimadon was one, wasn't it?
I can't remember the name. It was just something on the front of a magazine or something, and you just a floppy disk, you load it in, and yeah, literally a few things from the paper you put in previous form, and yeah, it just wholly inaccurate, but obviously gave us a tip that won.
Yeah, so if it had been totally inaccurate for your first bet, that may have been, you could have been doing something else now.
Yeah.
So, how long were you making your betting pay before you decided to go professional? You obviously weren't using that method.
So I sort of I finished school, I was still gambling, losing, just having fun with it. And then I went on, I sort of worked a bit in a year between school and university. And at that time I was working in a warehouse in John Lewis, and the people there were kind of quite into their gambling. And at that point I started getting things like Superform, reading all their ratings, and slowly sort of thinking about it. Then I went off to university, and there I learned bits and bobs about how to model events and things like that. So slowly over that period of time while I was at university, I started betting more. By the time I left university, I was living with my parents, so I didn't have that many expenses, and that's when I started betting sort of all the time. And I would say, yeah, I got enough money together to then move to London and carry on with it.
They're not a bit perturbed that their son had gone through university and he was betting for a living?
No, I think so. My dad sent me a cheque at one point and said, don't put it all on one horse with some money he had. But yeah, no, they were broadly supportive. My mum was a bit unsure, I'd say, but my dad was always been, so he was a solicitor all his career, and said, go for it, that's what you want to do.
Okay, so you told me that the first edge you had was speed figures. Now, speed figures have been around, for a long time. So what did you do that Timeform, for example, didn't do?
I wouldn't say I did that much different. So all-weather racing was where I really focused, and the surfaces we had then were like very much front runner, steady pace. I think there was sort of fibre sand Equitrack. So I just sort of got Nick Morden's book, Andy Barr, read all that, and then programmed my own speed figures from those. So I wasn't having an opinion. So I read a lot where people say, oh, I rate the track this fast, this slow. I just did my own sort of automated ones and relied completely on those. And really just betting the top rated speed horse was making a good return.
Okay, so that'd be every top rated speed horse, or would you sort of go for ones that were standing out?
On the all-weather.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone on the all-weather would return at SP a sort of 10% margin at that point, back then.
And that is with everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people assuming that it's not entirely straight on the all-weather. So that fairly much proves that it's almost totally straight.
That sort of thing didn't occur to me back then. I was just, it was purely sort of the numbers. And and just seeing that the top rated ones or the top 2 rated were getting a good return.
Okay, so you were, and also you told me that you were pricing races up yourself. So, I mean, how did you correlate the sort of, were you doing it off the speed figures, or were you delving into the form to do the pricing, or how were you?
So the pricing by my own pricing system sort of started later. So early on I was literally just using speed ratings. So I was assuming the prices were vaguely accurate to the other factors in the market, but if I could just bet my top 1 or 2 in the ratings, I would make money. And it was literally as simple as that back then.
Right, so you studied management services at Southampton University. Was there anything you learned there instrumental in developing a winning formula on the horses, or was this all done in your spare time?
There were bits. I did my undergraduate dissertation on betting market movements. So I sort of spent a summer with one of those sort of race form books, going through opening price, closing price, and sort of working out which trainers, which types of races, if you kind of followed the money, you could make money off. So I did that, but it wasn't really focused on gambling. No, it was helpful in the mathematics and things I learned from it.
Yeah. So so what sort of stakes did you need to place to make enough money to live on at the time?
So after university, when I first started, I wasn't staking that much, like £100, £200 a bet.
Yeah, that would have been a few quid back in. When was that? 1990. Well, the 1990s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I started smaller, but sort of slowly built it up, and those kind of figures. Whether I could have lived without living with my parents at that point in time, I don't think I could have, but I could build up my bank during that sort of first year.
So you were, I mean, were you trying to upscale? I mean, how long did these speed figures sort of betting last anyway? I mean, would they still, the way you did it, would they still be any good now?
No, you'd probably get negative return back in those speed figures in that way now. And also the tracks changed, so you've got Polytrack, and I don't think the speed figures, you need more sort of sectional timing and that sort of thing. Back then it was so evenly run races, you could rely on the final time. So I don't think that particular thing would work now.
So when you're talking about when you went through race form and you did your dissertation, a lot of sort of inputting figures and stuff. I mean, that how sort of was the tedium? Was that tedious as it, you'd imagine it to be, and was it something that you could plough through because of the end result?
Very tedious. I mean, I did remember one year doing it. A friend of mine was working with me on it, and he literally went off with a Superform book, entered it all in, and then I realised he'd entered the wrong figures in. So doing that manually it wasn't a long-term thing. I realised quite soon you really needed to get a data source that you could have all the previous form computerised, so you weren't entering it by hand. So at that point, this was quite a late 90s, I think, I got in touch with the Press Association, and this was pre-internet, and I was saying, can I get the history? And they sort of changed a few things around, so you could then, on an old modem, download the declarations in an easy to read file. And they also gave me like the last few years of form, all the results. So that was kind of how I computerized everything.
They gave it to you?
Well, for a fee, yeah. But they sorted it out. I think they went on to use that, for other people. So it wasn't just a thing for me. But.
Yeah. And were you relying on official times, or were you doing sort of timing yourself to sort of double check to make sure everything was, how accurate were they?
Official times, official distances. We found out years later that a lot of the tracks, all the distances were slightly off. So obviously that makes a big difference for speed ratings, but early on I don't think there was such a margin in it, it didn't matter. Now you'd really need far more accurate measurements.
Yeah. So you were betting successfully. You obviously didn't stay under the radar for very long, so you were getting restricted within a year or two. Back in those days, it was really only the real sort of, I'd say, shrewdies that were getting. Well, people think we're getting their accounts closed. They get the letter saying, you're something that we can't afford, your business we can't afford to take, that sort of thing. So you were, you must have been chopping it off fairly well.
Or just not been very sophisticated about what I was doing. So when
So you were betting on, was online a thing in these days, or was it?
so it started telephone betting,
Right, okay.
and then I think was it 98 or 99, Victor Chandler went to Gibraltar, so then all the tax thing changed. I think he was charging sort of 3% rather than, was it 9, something like that.
Yeah.
So I started using them, and that was like my main outlet. And I was sort of phoning up and saying, can I have £233 on this horse, which is, you just would never do that. I mean, it's just obvious you kind of know what you're doing if you start betting in those kind of numbers. So yeah, quite soon they gave me a good run, far more than you get now. But yeah, then they closed that down. There are other internet ones where I'll do things like, so back then if a price moved from say 5 to 1 to 9 to 2, 4 to 1, it would keep going in the same direction. Like nowadays it sort of chops in and out the whole time. So back then you could look on CFATS, you could see that the price had moved and still get the old price online. So if I had a horse of mine I wanted to back, I'd literally wait. If it drifted, I would back it after the drift. If it came in, I'd be like, right, now's the time to get on before the online books changed. And I think things like that obviously tips them off. They don't want that kind of business, which is fair enough. But I was doing things like that. I wasn't going on course or in the betting shop, betting at sort of show prices in the normal way.
So you must have been, to have those sort of unusual figures on you, what sort of staking plan were you using? Trying to bet a horse to win X amount of money?
Yeah, it was to bet to win whatever it would be, sort of £500 or something like that back then.
And you understood why bookmakers didn't want your business? I mean, was it a shock when they didn't?
I think a sort of shock, but also I was pretty naive then, so I was literally saying, well, can you send me a letter to prove that that's happened? Because I don't think, even in the first sort of year or two, I wasn't thinking this would be forever. It was just something I'd sort of started doing. But you know, it was always a thought, well, I may get another job. So I wasn't particularly devastated that they were being shut.
And did you, I mean, do you in hindsight wish you'd been a bit more canny, staying under the radar, or was there no other option at in those days?
I don't think so. So I went racing the first time, I think about 94, and it was so intimidating. Like sort of 20-year-old or 18-year-old, you go in the betting ring, and I really did not understand any of what was going on. Whereas when you're sitting at home, sort of looking at CFAX, it's very sort of clear what to do. So I don't think I was in a position to be any more canny, to sort of go on course. I didn't really have the money to be travelling around doing all that at that point in time. So unless I sort of partnered up with someone that was older, more experienced at that point, no, I don't think it was. I don't regret, the way it panned out at that point.
It's interesting that you thought the betting ring was intimidating. I mean, I suppose it was intimidating, but these days it's a lot less intimidating, but there's less people in there. So,
yeah. Yeah, I remember, so Newmarket on 1,000 Guineas Day, and I think it was a really close finish, and there was all the sort of photograph betting, shouting out. Didn't even understand sort of what odds on was, what the way they described it on course just seemed different, alien to what I was used to.
Yeah, I'll take a 10 for 1, that sort of thing.
Yeah.